If you have Ancestry's Pro Tools, you might now be seeing Ancestry's clustering tool. I made one video about it already, and I will link it up here. But I see a lot of people see all this gray on a chart, and their first guess is that this is endogamy, but it's usually not. So today I'm going to teach you what these gray cells mean and how to better read your clustering charts on Ancestry. Now, I'll also include timestamps down below if you want to skip to a specific part on this video. Now, this is what endogamy can look like. This is shared by a friend, Kalani, who has Hawaiian heritage, and he just has so many matches and they're so interrelated, it says that they can't even cluster the matches. Now, endogamy is basically when you're from an isolated population. Maybe it's isolated geographically, like an island, or religiously, like Ashkenazi Jewish. And so basically everybody's marrying within that population. And so you end up being related to your matches in many different ways. And these could be very distant relatives. And so you just get this mess of DNA and it's hard to pull people apart. Pedigree collapse is similar, but that's when you have in your pedigree, your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, you have less than expected. So instead of 8 different great-grandparents, you might have only 6 because there's a couple that's on there twice because of cousin marriages. Or instead of 16 great-great-grandparents, you only have 14 because, again, there's a couple on there twice. Now, in both cases, endogamy and pedigree collapse, it matters how much of your tree this affects. If you are from that one population and that's your entire population, then it affects all 4 of your grandparents. And so your DNA is going to be very meshed. And you often get something like what I just showed you, where it can't even create clusters because everybody's showing a connection to each other. And again, these can be very distant connections, but they are connected. Or if it's just half of your DNA, you might get great clusters on paternal or maternal, but the other side is, again, that mesh, that interwovenness. Or if it's just one of your grandparents, the other 3 might be just totally fine, and you just have a mess on this one side. And so when people see all of these gray cells, they're like, wow, it looks like everybody's being related to each other. And so they think endogamy. But in this case, that's not the case. And it often is not the case. Instead, this is kind of an artifact, or it's an outcome of how Ancestry is creating their clusters. So that's what we're going to dive into today. Let's start with the basic history of clustering. So in 2018, I introduced the Leeds Method, which you can see here. And I will again link to some videos to show you how to do this if you're interested. But the Leeds Method helped us to cluster our matches. This was before Ancestry separated our matches between paternal and maternal. So we often could see those 2 sides, our dad's side and our mom's side, but we could also see all 4 grandparents. And this is one I did on my own DNA matches earlier this year. But then there are steps you can use. Again, I'll link to another video where you can consolidate some of these clusters and you get something more like this. And this is what I got. So now we have just 4 color clusters, and these do represent my 4 grandparent lines. And if you look, the top person is orange and red. Again, before Ancestry would show us that, it would show that this is what was either my paternal or maternal side. And there's also somebody blue and purple, so that would show the other side. And the Leeds Method is really cool because you can use it on any of the testing sites whenever you get matches like this. And so it was and continues to be a great tool. But we've had automated clustering since late 2018, in fact. And there were 2 major ones. There were a couple of others, but these are automated tools based on the Leeds Method. And the 2 big ones were the Collins-Leeds Method, and this is a Collins-Leeds Method right here, and AutoCluster. And you might see AutoCluster on MyHeritage or GEDmatch, and you get a little bit different view. Now, although some people are calling what Ancestry is doing AutoCluster, it's not related to the person, E.J. Blom, who, and I'm not sure if I say his last name correct, but this is not his program, even though some people are calling this auto clustering. That is the name of his tool. Well, this I ran in 2020. This was my matches from 90 to 400. That's the range that I tell people to use for the Leeds Method because I didn't want first cousins. I wanted more like second and third cousins. And this is one of the problems with how Ancestry is doing this, in my opinion, is they're using these matches that are too high and it's creating a lot of gray cells and causing confusion. So here I have quite a few clusters. Each of them are the different colors that goes purple, orange, blue, green, and then some other color. Within the orange cell, which that's called a supercluster, we have purple, orange, blue, green, and something under that number 5. Now, with Collins-Leeds method, you can include people who are unclustered, meaning they didn't make a cluster, which for Collins-Leeds method or CLM, you need at least 2 people. On Ancestry, you need at least 3. But here you can see the person with the little 5 is just a single unclustered person, but it's connected to some of this other cluster. So I call that a supercluster. We call that a supercluster, that number 1 through 5. And I've drawn that orange box around it because there's so much gray between it. Here we have, let's look at this 328 centimorgan match. A person can only be in one color. It's kind of like sitting a person at a table. You've got a lot of tables, and these tables mean different ways they're connected to you. But a person can only sit at one table, even though they can have connections to other tables. So this 328 centimorgan person sorted into purple because you can see they're matching every other person in purple, which you can see up here. And they're also matching all of these gray things. So they're matching everybody in orange. They're matching everybody in blue. They're matching one of the green people, but they're not matching the second green person or this number 5, whatever color that is. And so that is a supercluster. For the most part, I recommended, and I still do, that people work with a supercluster as just one entity. So just work on this and figure out who those people are, how are they related to each other, and then how are they related to you or the test taker. And yes, there might be some meaning in why the 3s separated from the 2s. But to begin with, it's just it's easier to just start with, okay, this is a cluster. And so here I actually have 4 major clusters or superclusters. I have 1 through 5. Then I have the 6, 7, 8. That's the second cluster. The 9 and the 10. 10 is actually hovering between the 2 clusters. And then I have 11 and 12. But you can see the person that here on the 10, well, this person is related to pink and purple. This person is just related to purple. So I would definitely include 10, 11, and 12 as this supercluster. And I didn't draw those. But now we have 4, and these do represent my 4 grandparent lines, which was and is a huge goal of working with our DNA matches. And if you're way beyond this and you're working a lot deeper in your tree, that's great. But for those who are just working with some of these DNA matches or trying to understand what's going on, that's where we start. Now, over on the left, I said, imagine if this was by size. And so on Ancestry, they order your clusters only by size. But with the CLM, we were ordering by inclusion. And so it's like, oh, there's a lot of connectedness with these gray cells. These were actually tricolor, but we can call them gray. There was a lot of this interconnectedness, and they're like, wow, we should put these all together because we have some of the people that are included in all of them. You could do it by size on CLM, but it's not that helpful. It would probably be this number 1 and then maybe 6, or I'd have to count them. But so this would be the next one. And then you'd have number 9, and then you'd have number 11. And so these cells here, this number 2 would be somewhere way down here. So you'd have all these gray cells that would be popping up down here. And you would start seeing gray all over the place because it's saying, well, this one and this one, which are now apart from each other, have this connection. They have these gray cells. The cats are, anyway, they're playing. They're getting a little rough with each other, but they're separated. And so we see these gray cells between them. And so it's so much better to group them, in my opinion. It makes more sense to group them by inclusion like this. And the other thing that they did was this 2/3 inclusion. You have a choice of 1/3 or 2/3 inclusion. And that means to show up in this purple, I had it at 2/3 inclusion. So a person has to match at least 2/3 of the other people in the purple. Well, you can see this top match, they match everybody. So let's go down to about here. And we don't really count this one because that's the person themselves. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's 11. They need to match at least 2/3. So I think they need to match at least 8, which they do because there's 3 white ones. So they match 8. So they're included. But this next person, this orange, they would need to match 8 of the purple people to be there. And instead they match 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so they didn't meet the requirements to be purple, so they started this new orange cluster. And none of these people matched at least 8 of the purples, and so they became orange because with orange, they needed to match at least 2/3. So here's like 2 out of 3, and that's why they became orange. That's what CLM does. But Ancestry uses this complicated algorithm. They do have white pages I've looked over, and it's talking about connectedness and stuff. But you can't, it's not as easy just to sit down and figure out. And in fact, and somebody who knows what they're talking about a lot more than I do, says that the reason we can rerun the clusters in Ancestry and get something new each time is because the seed that they're starting with is not always the same seed. I could look into that. You could look into AI to figure that out. But this is much easier for me to understand because I can just sit there and count them and understand why they formed in that specific cluster. Okay, this is my matches the same time, 2020, whatever month this was. But this time I ran it from 90 to 1200. This is more like Ancestry doing 65 to 1300. It's got a lot of the bigger matches, the closer matches to me, like my first cousins, including here we've got somebody who's 874 centimorgans. And so you can see we've got this super cluster here. Then we have a cluster here, and I would probably say this is a super cluster. But here we have these people, all 4 of these top people, 1, 2, 3, 4, that share more than 400 centimorgans, are matching both purple and then the orange and the blue and the green and the red and these unclustered people who don't have a color or we can't see the color. And so it's a lot less telling. This is a lot more like what you're seeing on Ancestry. These high matches match a lot of people, but they can only go into one cluster. And so you get a lot of these gray cells, and it's a little bit confusing. So here are my clusters on Ancestry. Again, Ancestry uses 65 to 1300 centimorgans. So it's more like the second CLM that we looked at. And we see lots of gray. We don't see as much gray as some people see, but there's quite a bit of gray. And so some people would look at this and say, there's endogamy. People are matching multiple clusters. But instead, it's often because we have these higher matches and because the way they're ordered by size from largest and then the medium ones down to the smallest, instead of by inclusion, like, these are matching each other, although mine turn out pretty good here matching each other. Okay, so who are these different clusters? I'm using, instead of 1 through 4 or 1 through 8 this time, I'm going to use letters. This is my maternal, so my mom's mom, my maternal grandmother. We have my paternal grandmother, my paternal, so my dad's dad, my dad's mom, my mom's dad, and my mom's mom. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of 4 clusters. 4, I always said on the Leeds Method, 4 is ideal because we see those 4 grandparent lines, but whatever happens to your clusters is just fine. You just have to figure out what it means from there. Now I'm pulling up the Leeds Method. This is from 2020, where the other one's from 2025. So there are more people in here, but I can still see these connections really easy. So I'm putting back these titles here and over here. So the orange in my Leeds Method is paternal. So it's this part and this part. And next is paternal, this part. And remember, I have this one person here that is matching both of them, which this person is, but we've got a few more, and I know who some of those are, but they weren't there in 2020. Then we have my maternal, which is just a few matches, and it's actually just this part here, which I'll explain in a bit. And then maternal, which I've got these 4 down at the bottom, and all these matches up here. Okay, so that's how they differ. And I just want to point out, if you are struggling with your ancestry clusters and not getting a lot of meaning out of them, and you're trying to do something that has to do with your parents or your grandparents, I suggest going back to the Leeds Method and getting something that's more clear and just straightforward like this. So I think that on the left, that's easier to understand than what's on the right. But I'm going to teach you how to understand what's on the right. But sometimes it helps to go through the process. So if you do your Leeds Method and then compare it to your ancestry, I think that could be a great way for you to figure out these connections. So from here, we're going to look at just my maternal matches. So that will be this orange one here and these. And if you're on Ancestry, you can just click, it either says all, or you can click maternal or paternal. And I'm clicking maternal. Here we go. So we have these orange And now they're closer together. We can see these lines connecting to the blue and connecting to the green. Now, first, I want to point out that when you have, if you're looking at just maternal or just paternal, and you have somebody basically running all the way across the screen, and remember, these screens, you can either read them from left to right or top to bottom, and it's the same thing. This is like a mirror, and they're mirror images. So you can see these gray cells here are a mirror image of these. So you could read it either way. But here's these two of my maternal first cousins. So they match my mom's dad's side and my mom's mom's side. And you can see they run almost basically across the total page. Like this one doesn't match these three people, and this one doesn't match these three. And they have to match at least 20 centimorgans for Ancestry to show it. And maybe they match less, or maybe they just don't show up as matches. But these are first cousins. So it's showing the connectedness between my mom's mom, my mom's dad, because these are descendants of that grandparent couple. Now that means in this maternal-paternal cluster, the first two matches are not just my mom's dad's side, my maternal-paternal, they are both. And so the only ones that are just my mom's dad's side are these 4 matches, 1, 2, 3, 4, which you can see in this 4x4 cluster here. And so we also have this gap. I'm going to be talking about gaps or white spaces and pretending like these are white cells. And when you see these white cells, you know there's not a connection between these. So there's no connection between blue and the orange, and there's no connection between these 4 blues and this green. And that's because these are just my mom's dad, and the others are my mom's mom. And so there shouldn't be any connections here. But these 2 people are descendants of my grandparents, and so they do match both sides. And that's kind of why I drew this X here to show that we've got this blank space here, and we also have the blank space here. So let's take a closer look at just my paternal ancestors, so my dad's. And we've got the first cluster is my dad's mom, then my dad's dad, and another with my dad's mom. But what I really want to look at first is these closer matches that would have been beyond the 400 that I shared on the Leeds method for the most part. These are first cousins, usually younger first cousins once and twice removed, or just first cousins themselves. So these are the people that stretch all the way across, and they're matching basically everybody. It doesn't have to be every single person, but they're stretching across. So both paternal, maternal, and paternal, paternal. And so we have this match here, and I'm going to gray these people out. So you can see most of these people are both, and then these are mirror images, so I can cross up and down to, and then we also have this person. So I'll uncover them for a second, but you can see this. And so now that we've blocked those out, if we could even, I could redo this whole chart and just see this, it's a lot more meaningful. Now, something else I notice when I'm working on this is the gaps. So gaps are so important. We have this big gap here, these white cells, and it's showing that this cluster and this cluster, when you get rid of those first cousins, are not connected at all. So my dad's mom and my dad's side are not connected. And we also see that here where dad's dad and dad's mom are not connected. But then we have this little group here that's a little bit different. Now, first, this single cell here, that's kind of an outlier. This is a DA something, and this is a DR, 2 different people. And they are connected in some way that has nothing to do with me. It's some other part of their tree. This match threw me for a while. But if we got rid of this, and so we can tell it's an outlier because it's a single cell in this gap, this white area. And so that's a clue. We still need to investigate. But otherwise, we have this gap here. And that's meaningful because it's showing that these 2 top people are a little bit different than the 3 bottom people. And what it turns out to be is these 3 bottom people are only my dad's mom's side of the family and not my dad's mom's dad's side of the family. So it is an important thing to notice that although they're all matching each other, these 3 are matching differently, and it's because of that connection. And so here's just another way of looking at it. I've gotten rid of those gray ones. I've just got them kind of boxed in on the blue right now. But if we got rid of those, we see these gaps. And again, it's that mirror image. So we could just look at the bottom, the lower left or the top right. But we see these 3 gaps, and they're very meaningful when we see these gaps. So I moved myself out of the way so you can see what these first cousins and younger first cousins once and twice removed that share my grandparents in common with me, my dad's parents, Most of those would have been outside of what I would have done with the Leeds method. So I show how many centimorgans they match. The top 4 would have not shown up on my chart. The last 2 would have, but I wouldn't have seen so much gray. There's no place where we could cut it off and we would get everybody's first cousins would be not included and their second cousins would. And that's why I chose 400, because it often worked for most people. And it worked for me well too. But we've got these 2 matches now that they are related to both sides within that range. But Ancestry is including all these matches. And so you're seeing a lot of gray. When we get to that point where we can start changing the parameters ourselves and be able to say, I don't want to go to 1300. Hopefully this is how it works. I only want to go to 400. That can be a huge help, and you won't see so much gray that's confusing people. Now I'm going to show you some cluster charts that I've gotten permission to use. Most of these were shared on Genetic Genealogy Tips and Techniques Facebook group, and I got permission to use these just to demonstrate some different things. This is one that I really like because she had broken these out. She said, this is paternal, maternal, paternal, maternal. Let's just start there. We see these gaps. This gap is saying there's not a connection between these paternal and maternal. That's the same as this gap. There's not a connection and not a connection. But these grays are saying there's a connection between this orange and the hot pink. And that makes sense because they're both maternal. And here it's interesting because it's just the top 2 people are saying there's a connection between, I'm going to call this salmon now, I think that's a better term, between this salmon group and the purple group, but it's just these top 2. Now, a couple really interesting things about this. So this is not her DNA, it's a cousin's DNA. Here's this person who was sharing this, and she sorted into the salmon cluster, but her full brother sorted into purple. And so as far as we know, there's no real reason that they should be in 2 different clusters, but they do show up in 2 different clusters. And that's, again, beyond where this is an algorithm and not a rule I can just look at and say, this is why this is here. She also has this first cousin once removed here. But then she's got these 2 interesting matches that are, so it would be this little group here, these 2 purple people who are not connected to, there's this huge gap, and there's meaning here. There's some reason why these are not here. And this is something she could investigate. Now here's another. This is maternal side only, but then she's breaking it out because we're kind of looking for these 4 grandparents. And she's like, well, this is my dad's side, dad's side, dad's side, dad's side. This is both, and then this is mom's side. So that's basically what she told us. But let's see if we can go a little further. Because again, this looks like, oh my gosh, there's endogamy. There's so much gray. But hopefully you understand now it's just because of how Ancestry is forming clusters. Now we have some people, okay, this is just mom's side, but we have people that are going all the way across. A lot of people going all the way across, like mainly all these orange, a lot of these salmon. Then we get down to the purple and we start seeing some gaps. Here's a gap. And here's a gap. So this is very interesting. And here's a gap, except for this one box, which I think might be an outlier, meaning those 2 people might be related in a different way. But it's telling me that these 3 people here might not be connected to this purple, although the purple are related to all these other salmon. Actually, I would like to see this one over here with these gaps too, and this one. So I would like to rearrange those. We have a gap here. And again, that means these 3 people are somehow not connected to the purple, where these others are connected to the purple. So we're looking for gaps. We have this orange where the orange is not matching anybody on blue, except for this one match here. They're not matching anybody in hot pink. And this is making sense because these are maternal. And then she mentioned that these are both, but it looks like maybe just these top 3 people are both, because we see, these are going all the way across. So these are people descended from that grandparent couple. But we have these last 3 people that are not showing up as matches to any of the maternal. And that could just be how it worked out. Or it could be that these 3 are not actually both at all. They're actually just paternal and not maternal. This is not pedigree collapse. We do have 2 different sides. There's just a lot of gray because there's a lot of groups without putting everybody together as a super cluster. And in fact, I boxed out some of these gaps that I think are important to look at. And again, I missed a couple. I would have liked to see this here. And we've got this. We've got most of this. So there's some other gaps here, which are probably quite meaningful. So let's take a look at this one. This one that they had posted, I'm guessing with all this gray, probably somebody said it looked like endogamy. But the question actually by the one who posted this was that people kept saying, well, it looks like cluster 1, 2, 4, and 5 are connected to each other and not cluster 3. And so this is cluster 3, the purple one. And you can see there's very little gray in here. Now there's some people like this gray person, it looks like is connected to everybody. And this one, this one, this one, those are probably connected to everybody. But the purple doesn't have a lot of connectedness to the orange, salmon, blue, and green. But if we look at orange to salmon, there's lots of overlap. If we look at orange to blue or orange to this light green, there's lots of connection. If we look at salmon to blue, there's not as much, but salmon to this teal, there is. That's a teal. Blue to teal, there's quite a bit. And so, but the purple is different. And so that is why they said that this cluster 1, 2, 4, and 5 are really connected and the others aren't. If you're finding this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing and also signing up for my newsletter, which is in the description. But if you have these clusters, what do you do next? Especially if these are clusters contain a lot of people that you don't know. Well, the next goal is to figure out how the people are related to each other. Like I know these are my mom's side, but you might not know that. So you figure out how they're related to each other or connected to each other, and then how you are related to that cluster. And I'm going to link to another video showing you how to do that. And you might also use, since you obviously have Pro Tools if you're doing this, how you can use the enhanced shared matches to learn even more. But again, the big things are that when we see gray, that's because we have these closer relatives on here. And because of how the clusters are in order, not by inclusion and which ones match each other, so we can see the super clusters, but by size, which is really kind of throwing us off. So those are two of the big reasons we're getting confused. And then look for these gaps, these big white gaps that are telling you, hey, there's not a connection here between these orange people and these other three, which on mine, this is a supercluster or this supercluster. There's a gap here, and we also have these gaps here. So look for those gaps, figure out how people are connected, and I will plan on making another video. I think there's a lot more to discuss on here, and I really want you guys to figure out what these ancestry clusters really mean and how they can help you. Till next time.